The summons. The crystalline spires of the Galactic Council stretched toward the violet sky of Nexus Prime, their surfaces shimmering with the collective wisdom of 400 species. Within the Grand Assembly Hall, tension crackled like static electricity as representatives from across the galaxy took their designated positions. The Velcrin Empire's delegation arrived with their characteristic arrogance, their obsidian armor gleaming under the bioluminescent ceiling. Commander Zephyros Velcrin, third son of the Imperial dynasty, surveyed the chamber with barely concealed contempt. His 6 eyes, arranged in a predatory formation across his elongated skull, picked out the various species he considered beneath his notice. The insectoid chitlins, the gelatinous morphids, the reptilian saurochs, all inferior beings that should be grateful the Velcrin Empire hadn't already absorbed their territories. What puzzled Zephyros was the empty seat at the central podium, reserved for species of particular significance. In his 3 centuries of military service, he'd never seen that seat occupied. The Velcrin had assumed it was ceremonial, a relic from the Council's naive early days. Council Arbiter Lissa, a being of pure energy contained within a crystalline form, initiated the proceedings. Her voice resonated through every translator simultaneously, creating an eerie harmony. We convene this emergency session to address the Velcrin Empire's unauthorized expansion into the Terran-protected zone. Zephyros scoffed audibly. The humans? Those primitives barely mastered faster-than-light travel 50 solar cycles ago. They have no claim to 3 entire sectors of resource-rich space. The claim predates your awareness, Commander, Lissa replied, her form flickering with what might have been annoyance. The Terran species were granted protected status upon first contact, pending their cultural development assessment. By whose authority? Zephyros demanded, his armored fist slamming against his podium. The Velcrin Empire recognizes no power greater than itself. We have conquered 600 worlds, crushed 40 civilizations, and... The chamber doors opened with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. The figure that entered moved with casual confidence that immediately drew every eye in the hall. She was remarkably unremarkable by galactic standards. Bipedal, bilateral symmetry, only 2 eyes, no obvious natural weapons. Her skin was a warm brown, her hair cropped short in a practical style, and she wore a simple uniform of deep blue with gold insignia. But something in her stride made Zephyros's combat instincts flare to life. My name is Ambassador Nalani Okoye, the human said, her voice carrying clearly despite the lack of artificial amplification. I represent the Terran Coalition. And Commander Zephyros, I'm here to discuss your recent trespassing. The Velcrin delegation erupted in harsh laughter. Zephyros's mandibles clicked in amusement. Trespassing? Child, your species hasn't even left its own spiral arm. Your infant's playing with toys you don't understand. The Velcrin Empire has existed for 12,000 years. What could you possibly? You attacked mining station Kepler 442, Nalani interrupted, her tone remaining conversational. Killed 47 people. Took 200 more as slaves. Then you claimed the entire sector by right of conquest. Standard Imperial procedure, Zephyros said dismissively. Be grateful we don't consider your entire species forfeit for their resistance. Nalani smiled, and for reasons Zephyros couldn't explain, his primary heart skipped a beat. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was the expression of a predator who just realized the prey had walked into its den willingly. Commander, I need to ask you something. Have you ever wondered why Earth was granted protected status? Why the Council, which usually debates for decades before taking action, immediately placed our entire region off limits? Bureaucratic inefficiency and sentiment, Zephyros replied. The Council has grown weak, afraid to acknowledge that only the strong deserve to survive. Nalani walked slowly toward the central podium, her footsteps echoing in the now silent chamber. Wrong. The Council learned something about humanity during first contact. Something they tried very hard to keep from the rest of the galaxy. She paused at the podium, resting one hand on its surface. They learned what we're capable of when pushed. Threats. Zephyros laughed again, though this time it sounded forced even to his own ears. From a species that's barely. Not threats, Commander. History. Nalani pressed a control, and the chamber's holographic display activated. Images flooded the space, ancient, primitive, brutal. Humans in armor made of metal, swinging blades and axes. Cities burning. Weapons that seemed impossibly crude yet horrifyingly effective. This is us at our youngest, Nalani said quietly. This is what we did to each other before we even understood what stars were. The images accelerated. Gunpowder. Cannons. trenches filled with bodies, mushroom clouds rising over cities. The entire chamber watched in growing horror as humanity's blood-soaked history unfolded before them. Zephyros felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Uncertainty. The education. The holographic display continued its relentless march through human history, and with each passing moment, the assembled delegates grew quieter. Nalani stood at the center of the chaos, her expression neutral, letting the images speak for themselves. "You see, Commander," she said, gesturing to a projection of ancient warriors, "we've been perfecting warfare since before we invented writing. While your species was learning to cooperate through biological imperatives, we were learning through conflict. Every generation we found new ways to kill each other more efficiently." Zephyros tried to maintain his composure, but his tactical mind was already analyzing what he saw. The human's capacity for violence wasn't unusual. Most species had brutal pasts. What unsettled him was the scale, the creativity, the sheer dedication to the art of destruction. "These are primitives," he said, though his voice lacked its earlier certainty. "Ancient history has no bearing on." "You're right," Nalani agreed, surprising him. "Let me show you something more recent." The display shifted to images Zephyros recognized. Sleek spacecraft, energy weapons, defensive installations. But the context was wrong. These weren't military vessels, they were civilian ships. Exploration vessels. Science stations. "This is the Terran Coalition today," Nalani explained. "Peaceful explorers. Scientists. Diplomats. We've spent the last 50 years proving to the Council that we've evolved beyond our violent past." She smiled that unsettling smile again. "They wanted to believe us so badly that they almost forgot why they were afraid in the first place." Counselor Threx, a Sorix elder with scales dulled by centuries of service, spoke for the first time. "Ambassador Okoye, perhaps we should." "No," Nalani said firmly. "The Velcrin Empire needs to understand. They need to know what they've awakened." She pulled up a new file, and Zephyros recognized the designation, "Classified Council Eyes Only." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Whatever this was, most of the delegates had never seen it either. The first image showed a human ship, or what remained of one. It hung in space, riddled with weapons fire, atmosphere venting from a dozen breaches. Zephyros felt a surge of satisfaction. This was proof of human weakness. Then the next image appeared. The attacking vessels, a species called the Zarnoth, now extinct, lay in pieces. Not destroyed in the clean, efficient manner of modern warfare, but torn apart. Shredded. The debris field suggested something impossibly violent had occurred. "First contact," Nalani said quietly. 68 years ago. The Zarnoth thought we looked delicious. They attacked a colony ship carrying 15,000 civilians. 3,000 survived the initial assault. The display showed the timeline. The attack. The desperate transmission from the colony ship. And then, impossibly quickly, the arrival of a Terran vessel. The TCS Indomitable, Nalani continued. A survey ship with a crew of 200. No military training. No weapons designed for combat. Just civilian scientists and engineers. Zephyros leaned forward despite himself. "Then how?" "They improvised." The word hung in the air like a blade. Mining lasers became cutting beams. Survey drones became kamikaze weapons. They flooded their cargo hold with antimatter from their experimental engines and ejected it into the Zarnoth formation. 37 enemy vessels destroyed in the first 5 minutes. The images showed the aftermath. The Zarnoth had retreated, but the Indomitable pursued. Not to drive them away. To eliminate them. The crew of the Indomitable hunted the Zarnoth for 6 days, Nalani said. They tracked them across 3 star systems. They used their warp signature against them, collapsed their shields with cascading harmonics, and boarded their ships with nothing but welding torches and raw fury. The final image showed the Indomitable returning to the colony ship. Battered. Barely functional. But victorious. They saved 11,000 civilians, Nalani said. And when the council arrived to investigate, they found something that terrified them more than the violence itself. She pulled up a communication log. Zephyros read the highlighted passage, his translator struggling with the emotional nuances of human language. "We are teachers, doctors, geologists, and parents. We left Earth to explore, to learn, to build new homes among the stars. But we are also human. And if you hurt our children, we will become what our ancestors were. We will remember every lesson written in blood across 10,000 years of history. We will not stop. We will not forgive. We will make you extinct." The chamber was absolutely silent. "The council didn't grant us protected status because we were weak," Nalani said, her voice echoing in the stillness. They did it because they were afraid of what would happen if anyone forced us to remember what we are. Zephyros felt his combat implants analyzing the human before him, calculating threat levels, strategizing responses. Every analysis came back with the same conclusion. Unknown variable, insufficient data, extreme caution recommended. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zephyros Velkrin felt something he'd only inflicted on others. Fear. The history lesson. Ambassador Nalani Okoye let the silence stretch, watching as the reality settled over the Galactic Council like a heavy shroud. She could see the calculations happening behind Zephyros's 6 eyes, the warrior's mind trying to reconcile what he'd seen with his understanding of the universe. "You're wondering if this is propaganda," she said, addressing the unspoken question. "If we've exaggerated our capabilities to intimidate you." She gestured to Arbiter Lissa. Perhaps the Council's records would be more convincing. Lissa's crystalline form pulsed with reluctance, but she complied. The holographic display shifted to official Council documentation, each file bearing the highest classification seals. "Report 127 Alpha," Lissa intoned. Following the Zarnoth incident, the Council dispatched a research team to Earth to assess Terran development. What they found. She paused, her energy form flickering, disturbed them greatly. New images appeared, Earth from orbit, beautiful and blue, deceptively peaceful. Then the camera zoomed closer, revealing massive structures built into mountainsides, underground complexes, orbital platforms bristling with defensive capabilities. "This was Earth during what humans call their Cold War," Lissa continued. "A period when 2 human factions nearly destroyed their entire species over ideological differences. At its peak, they had accumulated enough nuclear weapons to render their planet uninhabitable 50 times over." Zephyros scoffed, though it sounded hollow. "Suicidal madness." "Deterrence," Nalani corrected. "We called it mutually assured destruction. The principle was simple. If you attack us, we'll ensure you can't survive our response, even if we don't survive either. No victory, no conquest, only mutual extinction." The images shifted again, showing research facilities, weapons development centers, biological warfare labs. Each one bore a date, and Zephyros realized with growing horror that these weren't ancient facilities. Some were less than a century old. "You kept building?" asked Counselor Mira, a chitterling whose mandibles clicked nervously. "Even after achieving peace?" "We kept researching," Nalani corrected. "Because we learned something important about ourselves. We're very good at war. Terrifyingly good. And the moment we forget that, the moment we become complacent, we risk becoming vulnerable." She pulled up another file, and this one made even Zephyros recoil. It was a human military training manual, publicly available, detailing tactics for asymmetric warfare. Guerrilla tactics. Psychological operations. How to turn civilians into resistance fighters. How to make an occupation so costly that no conqueror could maintain it. "This is taught to our children," Nalani said calmly. "In schools. As history. Every human learns how their ancestors fought impossible odds and won. We study the Mongol hordes, the Roman legions, the Viking raiders, the Maori warriors, the Zulu impis. We memorize the tactics of Napoleon, Sun Tzu, Clausewitz, and Rommel." "You glorify violence," Zephyros accused, but there was uncertainty in his voice. "No," Nalani replied sharply. "We remember it. There's a difference. We remember what we're capable of, so we never forget the price. Every human city has monuments to our wars. Every culture has stories of battles won and lost. We carry our violent history like a scar, always visible, always reminding us of what we could become again." Counselor Threx spoke again, his ancient voice heavy with understanding. "This is why the protection protocol was enacted. Not to protect humanity from us, but to protect us from them." Partially, Nalani admitted. The Council hoped that given time, isolated from galactic politics, we would evolve beyond our nature. That our better angels would permanently triumph over our demons. She gestured at Zephyros. And then the Velkrin Empire decided to test that hope. Zephyros straightened in his seat, his military pride reasserting itself despite his growing unease. "One incident does not." "Mining station Kepler 442, Nalani interrupted, her voice suddenly cold. 47 dead. 200 enslaved. Among them was Dr. Kofi Mensah, who was 3 days away from retiring. Elena Vasquez, who had just learned she was pregnant. Marcus Chin, who was teaching his daughter to play the violin via quantum communication. She pulled up their images, each face frozen in happier times. The chamber watched as she displayed each victim, speaking their names, their stories, their dreams. You didn't attack a mining station, Commander. You attacked fathers and mothers, artists and scientists, people who chose to explore rather than conquer. People who believed the galaxy was ready for humanity's peaceful contribution. Nalani's hands clenched the podium, and for the first time, emotion cracked through her diplomatic facade. You killed my friend, Commander Zephyros. Sarah Kim. She was a geologist. She collected rocks from every planet she visited and sent them to her nephew on Earth. She was 43 years old, and she died begging your soldiers to spare the children in the station's nursery. The silence that followed was suffocating. So yes, Nalani continued, her voice barely above a whisper but somehow filling the entire chamber. We remember our history. And now, Commander, you're about to become part of it. The warning. Commander Zephyros Velkrin had faced death countless times across 3 centuries of warfare. He'd led charges against enemy fortifications, survived ship breaches in the void of space, and dueled opponents whose species had evolved specifically for combat. But as he looked at the human ambassador standing before the Galactic Council, he felt something that transcended simple fear. He felt the weight of inevitability. Are you threatening the Velkrin Empire? He asked, his voice steady despite the cold certainty creeping through his thoughts. Your entire species against the might of our armada? No, Commander, Nalani replied, and her expression shifted to something almost pitying. I'm not threatening you. I'm warning you. There's a difference. She pulled up a new display, and this time it showed current Terran Coalition ship deployments. Zephyros immediately noted their positions, scattered throughout human space, mostly near colonies and research stations. Defensive formations. Exactly what one would expect from a peaceful, exploratory species. This is our fleet, Nalani said. 437 vessels. Survey ships, colony transports, research vessels. Only 12 are dedicated military craft, and those are primarily for piracy suppression and search and rescue operations. Zephyros felt his confidence returning. The Velkrin Empire commanded over 6,000 warships, each one a masterpiece of destructive capability. Then you admit your inferiority. I admit our priorities, Nalani corrected. We've spent 50 years building a peaceful civilization among the stars. We've established 73 colonies, discovered 18 new sentient species, and made countless scientific breakthroughs. We're proud of this achievement. She zoomed the display back to Earth, to the soul system humanity called home. But we never forgot where we came from. The image shifted to show Earth's industrial capacity. Orbital shipyards, automated factory complexes, resource extraction operations throughout the solar system. Zephyros began doing calculations in his head, his tactical implants processing the data. In the 50 years since we left Earth, Nalani continued, we've maintained a specific industrial capacity. Not because we needed it for our 400 ships, but because we needed to ensure we could build more if necessary. Much more. Arbiter Lyssa's form brightened with alarm. Ambassador, this information is necessary, Nalani interrupted, never taking her eyes off Zephyros. The commander needs to understand what he's dealing with. She pulled up industrial specifications, production capacities, resource stockpiles. Zephyros's implants finished their calculations, and the result made his primary heart stutter. You're saying you could produce 1,000 warships within a solar cycle, he said slowly, not quite believing it. 2,000, Nalani corrected. If we converted all civilian production to military purposes. 3,000 if we started mining operations in previously protected nature reserves. She paused. 10,000 if we stopped caring about environmental impact and worker safety. Impossible, Zephyros protested. The resource requirements alone are well within our capacity, Nalani finished. Commander, your empire has been expanding for 12,000 years. You've optimized for conquest, for control, for the steady accumulation of power. You're very good at it. She gestured at the display showing Earth. We optimized for survival. For adaptation. For the absolute maximization of our ability to defend ourselves. Because we spent 10,000 years fighting ourselves, and we learned that the difference between survival and extinction is production capacity. Counselor Mira clicked anxiously. Surely the Council would intervene before. The Council has no authority over Earth's internal affairs, Nalani said. That was part of the protection protocol. You wanted us isolated, so you granted us complete autonomy within our territory. That means if we decide to convert our entire civilization into a war machine, there's nothing you can legally do to stop us. She turned back to Zephyros and her expression was grave. But here's what you need to understand, Commander. We don't want to do this. Every human alive today has grown up in peace. They've never known war. They've built lives, raised children, pursued dreams that have nothing to do with violence or conquest. The display shifted to show human colonies, children playing in parks, artists creating sculptures, scientists examining alien ecosystems with wonder. Normal life. Peaceful life. This is what we've become, Nalani said softly. This is what we've fought to achieve. And if you force us to remember what we were, if you make us rebuild our war machine and turn our civilization back toward violence. She let the sentence hang, but Zephyros understood the implication. A species that had clawed its way up from violence, that had finally achieved peace, would fight with desperate ferocity to preserve it. So I'm not threatening you, Nalani concluded. I'm begging you. Turn back. Withdraw from our territory. Return the people you enslaved. Because if you don't, if you force us to become what we used to be. She paused, her voice barely a whisper. The galaxy will learn why the Council was afraid. The calculation. The Galactic Council chamber remained frozen in tense silence as Commander Zephyros Velkrin processed the implications of Ambassador Okoye's words. His military conditioning screamed at him that this was a bluff, an elaborate deception designed to make the Velkrin Empire hesitate. But his tactical implants, cold and analytical, kept running the numbers. And the numbers were deeply troubling. A bluff, he finally said, though even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. You're attempting psychological warfare. Humanity lacks the industrial base to show him, Nalani said to Arbiter Lissa. Protocol Omega. He needs to see what first contact really revealed. Lissa's crystalline form dimmed with what might have been resignation. This information has been classified for 6 decades. Revealing it now will. The Velkrin Empire has already broken the protection protocol, Nalani interrupted. They've murdered our people. They've taken slaves. The time for secrets is over. After a long pause, Lissa complied. A new holographic file materialized, bearing seals that made several counselors gasp in recognition. Top secret, civilization threat assessment. When humanity achieved faster-than-light travel, Lissa began, her voice heavy with the weight of decades-old decisions, the Council dispatched its most experienced xenoanthropologists to assess their cultural development. The report they filed changed everything we thought we knew about species evolution. The display showed graphs, charts, comparative analyses between humanity and the 400 known sapient species. In every category related to technological innovation, humanity scored within normal ranges. But there were other categories, ones Zephyros had never seen in threat assessments before. Conflict resolution through violence, he read aloud. Cultural emphasis on military history. Capacity for sustained industrial warfare. Strategic thinking in zero-sum scenarios. His eyes widened. These metrics don't measure civilization. They measure combat efficiency, Nalani finished. The Council's researchers realized that humanity had evolved in a fundamentally different way than every other known species. We didn't develop sentience through cooperative behavior or symbiotic relationships. We developed it through competition. Through conflict. She pulled up a comparative analysis that made Zephyros's blood run cold. The average galactic species experienced approximately 50 major conflicts during their pre-space development. Large-scale wars that shaped their civilization. Humanity had over 12,000, Lissa said quietly. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. Counselor Threx's scales rattled with something that might have been awe or horror. 12,000 wars? Major conflicts, Nalani corrected. If you count every battle, every siege, every campaign, the number becomes effectively meaningless. We've been fighting each other for so long that war became part of our cultural DNA. Every language has dozens of words for different types of conflict. Every culture has military heroes who are remembered for thousands of years. Our literature, our music, our art, it's all saturated with warfare. She zoomed in on a specific section of the report. The Council's researchers concluded that humanity possessed what they called catastrophic adaptation potential. The ability to rapidly evolve our tactics, technology, and strategy in response to threats. Because we'd spent 10,000 years doing exactly that against each other. Zephyros found himself reading the report's conclusion, his translator struggling with the formal council language but the meaning coming through clearly. Recommendation: immediate establishment of protected zone around Terran space. Contact to be limited to scientific and diplomatic channels only. Under no circumstances should humanity be introduced to large-scale galactic conflict. Assessment indicates probability approaching certainty that exposure to external military threats will trigger civilization-wide mobilization response. If humanity applies its internalized conflict adaptation to interstellar warfare, resulting cascade could destabilize galactic political structure. You were afraid we'd become conquerors, Nalani said, and there was something bitter in her voice. That given access to galactic technology and resources, we'd sweep across the stars like we swept across our own planet. Yes, Lissa admitted. The Council has seen empires rise and fall. We've witnessed species that conquered through superiority of arms. But humanity's profile suggested something we'd never encountered. A species for whom warfare wasn't just a tool of policy but a fundamental expression of cultural identity. Zephyros felt his tactical certainty crumbling. But you said you've been at peace for 87 years, Nalani interrupted. The longest period without a major war in human history. We've spent less than a century learning to live without conflict. 12,000 years of evolution shaped by violence, and we've had less than one human lifetime to overcome it. She leaned forward, and Zephyros saw something in her eyes that terrified him more than any weapon specification or production capacity. He saw restraint. The conscious, deliberate choice to hold back something immense and terrible. So I'll ask you again, Commander, Nalani said softly. Do you really want to be the one who reminds us what we are? Do you want the Velcrin Empire to be remembered as the species that ended humanity's age of peace? Zephyros opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the council chamber. The demonstration. Red emergency lights flooded the Galactic Council chamber as the alarms continued their harsh wail. Arbiter Lissa's crystalline form flashed through the spectrum as she accessed the security network, her energy matrix processing information faster than any biological mind could manage. Unauthorized vessel entering Nexus Prime restricted space, she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. It's broadcasting Terran Coalition identification codes, but, she paused, her glow intensifying with what might have been shock. It's a warship. Nalani's expression didn't change, but Commander Zephyros noticed her hand move to a communication device at her wrist. Authorization Okoye 77 Delta, she said calmly. Stand down perimeter defenses. The vessel is expected. The chamber erupted in protests and confused questions, but Nalani simply gestured at the main display. Commander Zephyros wanted proof. I arranged a demonstration. The holographic display shifted to show external sensors, and every being in the chamber fell silent. The vessel approaching Nexus Prime was unlike any Terran ship on record. It was massive, easily the size of a Velcrin dreadnought, but its design was brutal in its efficiency. No smooth curves or elegant lines. It was angular, armored, bristling with weapon emplacements and defensive systems. This is the TCS Absolute Zero, Nalani announced. Humanity's first purpose-built warship in 63 years. Commissioned 2 weeks ago in response to the Kepler 442 incident. Zephyros's combat implants were already analyzing the vessel, identifying weapon systems, calculating threat levels. Every scan came back with the same assessment: extreme danger. 2 weeks? That's impossible. A ship of that size requires 18 months to build under normal circumstances, Nalani agreed. We did it in 14 days. Every orbital shipyard in the Sol system working in parallel. 3 shifts of workers, 24 hours a day. We pulled engineers from civilian projects, diverted resources from colony support, and utilized every lesson we learned from our peaceful exploration vessels. She pulled up the ship's specifications, and Zephyros felt his certainty crumbling further. The Absolute Zero wasn't just a warship. It was a concentrated expression of everything humanity had learned about violence, refined through modern technology and industrial capacity. Plasma lance batteries derived from mining laser technology, Nalani detailed. Missile systems adapted from our asteroid deflection programs. Shield generators using principles we discovered while protecting colonies from stellar radiation. Electronic warfare capabilities based on our communications network architecture. Counselor Mira clicked nervously. But surely one ship, no matter how powerful. One ship in 14 days, Nalani interrupted. Earth currently has 47 more in various stages of construction. At current production rates, we'll have a fleet of 200 warships within 6 months. 500 within a year. The display shifted to show footage from Earth's orbital space. Massive shipyards working at frantic pace, industrial complexes expanding, resource streams being redirected from civilian to military production. Zephyros watched with growing horror as humanity's peaceful civilization transformed before his eyes. "This is what you've awakened," Nalani said, her voice heavy with something that might have been regret. "For 63 years humanity has been at peace. Our shipyards built colony vessels. Our factories produced tools for exploration and discovery. Our scientists pursued knowledge for its own sake." She gestured at the absolute zero, now holding position above Nexus Prime. 2 weeks ago that changed. The moment news of Kepler 442 reached Earth, every human alive remembered. They remembered what their ancestors were. They remembered 10,000 years of warfare. And they made a choice. The display showed news broadcasts from Earth, and Zephyros's translator struggled to keep up with the torrent of human emotion. Grief and rage mixed with cold determination. Memorial services for the dead. Protests demanding military action. Politicians declaring states of emergency. Factory workers volunteering for overtime. Scientists abandoning peaceful research to develop weapons. 18 billion humans, Nalani said quietly. Each one carrying the genetic and cultural legacy of the most violent species the galaxy has ever encountered. Each one now asking themselves the same question: are we going to let this stand? She turned to face Zephyros directly. "I came here to give you a choice, Commander. To offer the Velcrin Empire one chance to step back from the precipice. But I need you to understand what's at stake." Nalani activated a direct communication channel to the Absolute Zero. "Captain Osei, please demonstrate our capabilities." The ship's weapon systems activated, and targeting sensors locked onto a test asteroid in Nexus Prime's outer system. The asteroid was massive, large enough that destroying it would normally require sustained bombardment from multiple vessels. The Absolute Zero fired once. The plasma lance that erupted from the warship was like a miniature star, brilliant and terrible. It crossed the distance to the asteroid in seconds, and the impact was devastating. The massive rock simply ceased to exist, vaporized so completely that only a cloud of superheated plasma remained. The entire demonstration took less than 30 seconds. "That was at 17% power," Nalani said into the absolute silence that followed. "We didn't want to risk destabilizing the orbital mechanics of Nexus Prime's system." Commander Zephyros Velcrin, veteran of 3 centuries of warfare, conqueror of worlds, felt his tactical implants reaching a conclusion he'd never expected. The Velcrin Empire had made a catastrophic mistake. The decision. The silence in the Galactic Council chamber was absolute. The holographic display still showed the expanding cloud of plasma where a massive asteroid had existed moments before. The TCS Absolute Zero held position above Nexus Prime, a dark promise hanging in space. Commander Zephyros Velcrin's 6 eyes tracked between the warship, the human ambassador, and his own tactical calculations, which had now reached conclusions that fundamentally challenged everything he believed about the galaxy's power structure. "You're bluffing," he said, but the words came out hollow. "One ship. A demonstration against an inanimate object. The Velcrin Empire has faced worse." "Have you?" Nalani asked, and there was genuine curiosity in her voice. "Have you ever faced a species that spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other? Have you ever fought an enemy that considers warfare not just a means to an end, but a fundamental part of their identity?" She gestured at the display which now showed real-time footage from Earth. "While we've been talking, 3 million humans have volunteered for military service. 3 million people who were teachers, farmers, artists, engineers yesterday. People who chose peace and are now choosing war because you made it necessary." Zephyros watched the footage with growing unease. These weren't the typical conscripts he'd seen from conquered species, terrified civilians forced into military service. These were volunteers streaming into recruitment centers with expressions of cold determination. Some were crying. Many looked like they were attending funerals. But they all kept coming. "This isn't just about vengeance," Nalani continued. "Every human who volunteers understands what's at stake. If we don't respond to Kepler 442, if we let the galaxy believe we're weak, how many other empires will test us? How many more stations will be attacked? How many more of our people will die?" She pulled up a new document, and Zephyros recognized it as a formal declaration. "The Terran Coalition Congress is meeting right now. In approximately 4 hours, they will vote on a declaration of war against the Velcrin Empire. Our projections suggest it will pass with 98% approval." "Then you've already decided," Zephyros said, feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. At least war was something he understood. Battle he could fight. This psychological warfare, this constant revelation of new horrors, was wearing on his centuries of conditioning. "No," Nalani replied, and her expression softened slightly. "I've decided nothing. I'm not humanity's dictator. I'm just its ambassador. But I can tell you what will happen if war is declared." The display shifted one final time, showing strategic projections, battle simulations, casualty estimates. Zephyros's tactical implants processed the data, and he realized with growing horror that these weren't human propaganda. These were council projections, calculated by neutral AI systems that had no reason to favor either side. The Velcrin Empire would win the initial engagements. Their superior numbers and experience would give them early victories. But then the human industrial capacity would activate fully, and the projections showed an exponential curve that climbed beyond any reasonable military response. Within 18 months, Nalani said, reading the same data, humanity would have a fleet larger than the Velcrin Empire's. Within 30 months, we would match your total military capacity. Within 5 years. She paused, letting him see the final projection. Within 5 years, the Terran coalition would possess the single largest war machine the galaxy has ever seen. And the cost? Counselor Threx asked quietly. Nalani's expression darkened. To humanity? Irreparable. We would have to sacrifice everything we've built. Our colonies would become military bases. Our artists would become engineers. Our children would grow up learning tactics instead of poetry. We would transform our entire civilization back into what we spent 10,000 years trying to escape. She turned back to Zephyros. And the cost to the Velcrin Empire would be extinction. Not because we want it, but because once we start, we won't be able to stop. That's what the Council's psychologists discovered about us. Once humanity fully commits to war, we don't negotiate. We don't compromise. We fight until we achieve total victory or total annihilation. Zephyros felt something crack inside his certainty. He'd spent 3 centuries conquering, always believing that military might was the ultimate authority in the galaxy. But he was beginning to understand that there were things more dangerous than superior firepower. There was desperation. There was a species that had crawled out of darkness once and would do anything to avoid falling back into it. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Return our people," Nalani said immediately. "All 200 who were taken as slaves. Withdraw all Velcrin forces from Terran-protected space. Pay reparations to the families of those killed at Kepler 442. And if I agree?" Zephyros asked. "If the Velcrin Empire submits to these demands? Then I will recommend to the Terran Congress that they postpone the war declaration," Nalani replied. "I will argue that the Velcrin Empire made a mistake, that they didn't understand what they were doing and that they've corrected course. I will spend every ounce of political capital I have convincing my people that peace is still possible." She leaned forward and Zephyros saw exhaustion behind her eyes. "But understand this, Commander. This is the only chance. If the war declaration passes, if human blood starts to spill in combat, I won't be able to stop it. No one will. Humanity will remember what it is and the galaxy will burn." Zephyros looked around the chamber. Every delegate was watching him, waiting for his decision. He thought about his empire, his emperor, the glory of conquest that had defined Velcrin culture for 12 millennia. And he thought about the asteroid that had simply ceased to exist. "I need to consult with the Imperial High Command," he said finally. "You have 2 hours," Nalani replied. "After that, the Terran Congress votes." Commander Zephyros Velcrin stood in his private chambers, a quantum communication array connecting him across light years to the Velcrin Imperial Palace. Emperor Kaldros the Eternal appeared in holographic form, his ancient features twisted with curiosity and contempt. "You summoned me for a consultation?" the Emperor said, his voice dripping with disdain. "Have you grown so weak that you need permission to crush a species of primitives?" "Your Majesty," Zephyros began carefully, "the situation is more complex than—" "I have reviewed your reports," Kaldros interrupted. "One warship. Some industrial capacity. Ancient history of violence. Commander, the Velcrin Empire has crushed hundreds of species exactly like this. What makes these humans different?" Zephyros pulled up the data he'd gathered, the projections, the historical records, the Council's classified assessments. "They evolved through conflict, Your Majesty. 12,000 wars before they even left their planet. They've been at peace for less than a century, but their capacity for industrial warfare is irrelevant," Kaldros snapped. "We outnumber them 6,000 ships to 1. We have conquered 600 worlds. Our military tradition spans 12,000 years." He leaned forward, his hologram flickering with intensity. Are you telling me that the Velcrin Empire should bow to threats from a species that only discovered faster-than-light travel 50 years ago? I'm telling you that if we continue this course, we may win the first battles but lose the war, Zephyros said, his military training warring with his tactical analysis. The humans will transform their entire civilization into a war machine. They have the capacity, the will, and the cultural memory to sustain a conflict that could last decades. Then we will crush them in those decades, Kaldros replied. Commander, you disappoint me. I sent you to represent Velcrin's strength, and instead you counsel retreat. Zephyros felt the weight of his emperor's judgment, felt centuries of military conditioning telling him to obey, to accept the wisdom of his sovereign. But he also felt his tactical implants screaming warnings, showing him projections that ended with the Velcrin Empire shattered. Your Majesty, I counsel strategic wisdom. We can absorb this loss, return the slaves, withdraw from their territory. We lose nothing but pride. But if we fight, then we will demonstrate to the galaxy that the Velcrin Empire bows to no one, Kaldros finished. We will show these humans and every other species that there is a cost for defiance. We will make an example that will echo for 10,000 years. The Emperor's hologram stabilized, his decision made. You will inform the human ambassador that the Velcrin Empire rejects her demands. We will not return the slaves. We will not withdraw. We will not pay reparations. Instead, we will mobilize our full military capacity and teach humanity the price of threatening their betters. Zephyros felt something inside him break. Not his loyalty but his certainty. For the first time in 3 centuries, he questioned whether his emperor understood what they were facing. And Commander, Kaldros added, his voice cold, if I detect any further hesitation or doubt from you, I will find someone else to prosecute this war. Someone who remembers what it means to be Velcrin. The communication ended, leaving Zephyros alone with his thoughts and his dread. He had 90 minutes until the deadline. Ambassador Nalani Okoye stood in the council chamber, watching the chronometer count down. Around her, delegates whispered nervously, placing bets on which way Zephyros would decide, calculating how this would affect their own species' interests. Arbiter Lissa floated nearby, her crystalline form pulsing with anxiety. Ambassador, if war is declared, the council will be obligated to maintain neutrality. We cannot intervene. I know, Nalani replied softly. And you understand what this will mean? Not just for humanity and the Velcrin but for the entire galactic order? If humanity wins, if they demonstrate the capacity for total warfare that the Council has feared, every species will have to recalculate their security assumptions. I know, Nalani repeated. Can you stop it? Lissa asked. If Zephyros refuses, if the war begins, can you prevent humanity from becoming what the Council fears? Nalani was quiet for a long moment. No, she finally admitted. Once the Congress declares war, once human soldiers start dying, I won't be able to stop it. My people will remember every lesson written in blood across 10,000 years. They'll remember that the only way to ensure survival is to make it impossible for your enemies to threaten you ever again. Total victory or total annihilation, Lissa quoted. Yes. The chronometer continued its countdown, 15 minutes remaining. The chamber doors opened and Commander Zephyros Velcrin entered. His expression was unreadable, his 6 eyes scanning the assembled delegates before settling on Nalani. Ambassador Okoye, he said formally. I have consulted with the Imperial High Command. Nalani felt her heart hammering but kept her expression neutral. And? Zephyros stood straighter, his military bearing perfect despite the turmoil she could see behind his eyes. The Velcrin Empire hereby rejects your demands. We will not return the slaves. We will not withdraw from contested space. We will not pay reparations. The chamber erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Nalani felt something cold settle in her chest. Furthermore, Zephyros continued, his voice carrying over the noise, the Velcrin Empire formally declares that all Terran-protected space is now considered Imperial territory. Any human vessels found within these boundaries will be destroyed. Any resistance will be met with total military response. He paused, meeting Nalani's eyes directly. The Velcrin Empire does not bow to threats from inferior species. We will teach humanity the price of defiance. Nalani stood silent for a moment, feeling the weight of what was coming. She thought about Sarah Kim, her friend who had died at Kepler 442. She thought about the billions of humans on Earth who were about to remember what their ancestors were. She thought about the galaxy that was about to learn why the Council had been afraid. Then may the cosmos have mercy on us all, she said quietly. She activated her communication device. Nalani Okoye to Terran Congress. Authorization confirmed. Recommend immediate approval of Declaration of War Resolution 447 Alpha. She looked at Zephyros one last time. Commander, I tried to warn you. I tried to give you a chance to step back. What happens next? Remember that you chose this. Across light years of space in the halls of the Terran Congress on Earth, a vote was called. The resolution passed in 4 minutes with 99% approval. Humanity went to war. And the Velcrin Empire learned that there are things in the galaxy more terrifying than superior firepower. There is a species that evolved through violence, achieved peace through exhaustion, and will fight with apocalyptic desperation to preserve what they've built. The Council had tried to keep humanity isolated, tried to give them time to evolve beyond their nature. The Velcrin Empire had made them remember what they were. And in the halls of the Galactic Council, where 400 species had gathered to witness diplomacy, they instead witnessed the beginning of a war that would reshape the galaxy. Ambassador Nalani Okoye stood alone in the center of the chamber, tears streaming down her face, mourning the peace that humanity had worked so hard to achieve and the violence they would now have to embrace. The Empire had learned fear in the halls of the Galactic Council. But they would learn something far worse in the battlefields to come. They would learn why humanity had been the only species in galactic history to receive protected status not for their weakness, but for their strength. Epilogue. 3 months later, the Velcrin Empire's Eastern Fleet engaged the Terran Coalition's Rapid Response Force in the Kepler sector. The battle lasted 47 minutes. The Velcrin lost 300 ships. The humans lost 12. 6 months later, human forces besieged the Velcrin colony of Zarthos Prime. When offered terms of surrender, the Velcrin garrison chose to fight. The siege lasted 3 days. There were no Velcrin survivors. 1 year later, Emperor Kaldros the Eternal sent an urgent message to the Galactic Council requesting mediation for a ceasefire. The Terran Coalition's response was simple: total withdrawal from all former protected space. Return of all enslaved persons. Reparations. War Crimes Tribunal for all officers involved in the Kepler 442 massacre. These terms are non-negotiable. The Velcrin Empire, which had existed for 12,000 years and conquered 600 worlds, agreed to every demand. In the halls of the Galactic Council, where species gathered to discuss politics and trade, a new understanding emerged. Humanity was no longer the protected species, the isolated curiosity that might one day be ready for galactic society. They were the species you didn't provoke. The species that remembered. And in quiet moments, when ambassadors from warrior cultures discussed military doctrine and strategic planning, they would sometimes reference a cautionary tale that spread through the galaxy like wildfire. They would speak of the Velcrin Empire, mighty and ancient, who made one critical mistake. They forgot that the most dangerous species aren't the ones who've perfected conquest. They're the ones who've perfected survival.